The Wheel of Time Season 3 finale is finally here, and I can finally talk about it. So let's get into my review for The Wheel of Time Season 3, Episode 8, He Who Comes with the Dawn. This is Unraveling the Pattern. I'm Lauren. I'm so excited to review the finale. I have a lot of things to say about it. But first, I just want to thank all of you for helping get me to, as of recording this video, 46,000 subscribers. Thank you. What an honor to be a fan of this series and to be able to make these videos and to have so many people watch them and respond positively to my reviews and my breakdown videos. I'm so thankful for all of you. Please continue subscribing. Help me get to 50,000 subscribers. As a reminder, I do these reviews and I release them as soon as I can, the morning after the episodes air. So I tend to get a lot of views for these and I'm very thankful for that. But the videos that I really put a lot of time and effort into are my unraveled videos, my episode breakdown videos. I have maps, I do timelines. I really dive deep into the episodes and try to help explain them for non-book readers and book readers alike. So they're mostly spoiler safe as well. So I'd recommend you watch those breakdown videos. And I'm working on my finale breakdown video as we speak. And I'm really excited to release that as soon as I can. But yeah, just remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that when I do release new content, you'll be the first to see it. So as always, I think this video is safe for non-book readers, but if you're not sure, after I make the video, I always go in and I update the description with a full spoiler warning so that you can see exactly what I think you should or shouldn't see. And so please read the description for a full spoiler warning. One thing I want to say very clearly up front is this episode was way better for me on rewatch. In my full season spoiler-free review, I basically was kind of ho-hum about the finale, and I was kind of disappointed at how they ended the finale. But after rewatching this episode for my review, I was like, wow, I really wasn't paying close attention on my first watch. And to be honest, when I first got the episodes, I was given screeners for the season. And so I was just so anxious to watch them that I was like watching them through the night on my phone, low quality, and I missed a lot of details on that first watch. And I have to say, after rewatching this finale and like taking notes and really paying close attention, a lot of the things I complained about in my full season spoiler-free review weren't even complaints. And so I'll address that in this video, but I just wanted you guys to know that I actually ended up loving this episode. I would say this is probably in my top 3 episodes of the entire show so far. It was definitely my favorite finale. And while I was a little bit kind of on the fence about it originally, that totally changed. And there's so much in this episode that's packed into it, especially for book readers, that I'm excited to unravel and break down in my breakdown video. But anyway, stellar episode. I definitely put this at like a 9.5 out of 10. Let's just stick to my format. We'll start with the good. I'm not just going to discuss this episode, I'm also going to be discussing my full season thoughts, and I'll be talking about speculation and theories related to potential future seasons, so this is going to be a long one. So I'm just going to look over here and go down my list because I have a lot to get to. First thing first, I wrote, love the use of the shawls. It makes me wonder if they'll use this again in the future. The Aes Sedai in the books always wear shawls of their Aja color with the Flame of Tarvalon symbol on them, so I thought that was a great nod to the books. But I also thought it was a good way to show that since Swan has been Amerlin, certain things like the tradition related to wearing shawls isn't as important to her. And this is one of the reasons that Elida didn't like Swan, is because she sort of was throwing certain Tower custom out the window. And I appreciated that nod. I'm guessing this is going to be a controversial choice, but I actually loved the use of a trans woman as an Aes Sedai in the flashback. This was played by an actress named Rebecca Root, and I thought she did a fantastic job. I know some people are going to complain about this because people on the internet are like that, but the fact is there are people like that who exist in the world, so why not have them be included as part of this story? I think it's beautiful and wonderful, and I specifically like that in the original book version of raising someone to the Amerlin seat, in Robert Jordan's typical kind of sexist mentality, he had the women have to show their breasts in order to prove that they're women before they could vote for the Amerlin, which, I mean, that's just stupid. And so I actually like that they not only did away with that, but that they added in the shawls, and they had a trans person saying, you can be Aes Sedai if you're Aes Sedai. I also like the idea that the ability to channel the male or female half is dependent on your soul, not necessarily your body. So I'm cool with that change. In general, I just really liked all of the Tower politics. I wrote here, Rand meeting his toe to Alcera by harvesting her squash. What a great moment. You can almost see Rand repeating her name in his head over and over, starting his mental list. In the books, for each woman who dies, Rand sort of makes this mental list of the women who die for him or because of him. And I think that maybe he's going to start that process. That scene where Rand met Lanfear in the dream and he took her to the place where the Sharom originally crashed and where she released the Dark One. I really liked that sequence. And I particularly liked after Rand woke up, Egwene was there and they were all there waiting for Lanfear to attack. Like they were all ready for Rand to break up with Lanfear. And I have a theory about this, which I talked about in a previous video, where I'm not so sure that Rand was with Lanfear in the way that we all think. I think he was manipulating her as much or more as she was manipulating him. But all that aside, it was a really cool scene to see all of them prepared. Land pulling his sword, the women channeling, and even Avienda with her dual fire spear, super cool. And then Mullane, tiny little Mullane, just pulling out a tiny little dagger. Like, I thought that was really cool. Again, I'm just going through my list here. As I watched the episode, I listed all this. So Matt calling Tom old man, and then Tom calling Matt a kid. I like that little nod. I love the dream setup and breakup scene between Rand and Lanfear, as I already talked about. And one thing I didn't mention about that is the true power visuals. So cool this episode. A mention of the Panarch Amathera. This show has to just kind of rush through so many plot lines. Amathera is actually a kind of important character in the books who has a future storyline related to a character named Julian Sandar, who isn't even in the show. But I like that they at least nodded to fans and said, hey, Panarch Amathera is a person. I really liked when Elaine mentioned delving and how Tom was like, yeah, when you were a kid in the Royal Court of Andor, you liked picking apart your mom's clocks and trying to figure out how they worked. Really great foreshadowing for things to come for Elaine and her talent. And did you notice when she picked up the balefire ter'angreal, Jiane had trouble figuring out how to get it to work, but Elaine made it work immediately. Just a few other things on my list. I'm going to go down this quick. I wrote, ew, the way Moghedien stripped out Samael's blood and flesh like one power weaves was so gross, but also so cool. And then Melindra saying death is lighter than a feather, duty heavier than a mountain as she died. I'll talk more about Melindra in a bit, but I did write this. Did Melindra die for good? It was cool to see her soul leave her body, similar to the effect that happened with Jaichim in episode 1 when his soul left his body. And another good moment for me was Moiraine admitting that Rand was right and she apologized to him. I appreciated that sequence. Every scene between Rand and Moiraine this season has just been great. Their little sort of subplot where they're kind of pushing against each other, but finally kind of become friends and agree to work together. I thought that was really beautifully handled in this episode. Another really cool thing, the way that Stilling was portrayed. I don't love how Swan's story ended, and I'll talk more about that soon, but I did love the visuals for how it looked when she was stilled. Very cool concept. And then another thing I wrote, Swan's death. I wasn't happy about Swan's death, but I liked how it was handled. I thought that she went out in a really great way. Her speech to Elida, I mean, the look on Elida's face, she genuinely looked kind of scared and kind of like called out by Swan. And I really appreciated that. But then Alviarin just being like, nope, you've already been sentenced, and then just killing her. That was rough. That's the part I didn't like so much. So with that in mind, let's get into the bad, the ugly, and the confusing. I have a very short list. And as you know, if you've watched my reviews, I love the show. Get over it. People call me a shill in the comments. I don't know what to tell you. Amazon doesn't pay me. I just like the show. So get over it. I'm sorry. But when I do mention things that I think are bad, I'm usually just talking about little nitpicks, or more than anything, as a book reader, there are some things I really hope to see. And so when I don't see them, that's what I consider bad. It's like, why didn't they include this detail or that thing? And so I often talk about that in my bad portion of the review. So just a few things. Samael's plot seemed to go nowhere fast. But it did set up the idea that Moiraine is hoping to capture a male Forsaken to teach Rand how to control his channeling. So I don't know how they're going to handle this in the future. We still know there's one Forsaken out there that hasn't been mentioned by name or hasn't been presented in the show. And so I'm still hopeful that that Forsaken is the one from books 4 and 5. I won't say more than that. But we'll see. Very minor thing, but the Panarch's palace is right up against the water, even though they described the higher class as being up higher in the hills in a previous episode. But then I thought, well, they did say many of the higher class are up in the hills, not everyone. So that's just a tiny nitpick that really isn't an issue. It stood out to me when I saw the Panarch's palace right on the water, and I was like, wait, I thought they said the rich and the wealthy were up in the hills. But anyway, that's not a big deal at all. Just something I noticed. I did write this, though, related to that. Apparently, not even the writers were listening to Elaine when she talked about Tanchico in that episode before. That was one of the funny moments, is she was like trying to study up on Tanchico, and Nynaeve was throwing up, and Matt was like, can we please get out of here? And I just like how no one was listening to her. And so it's kind of a funny concept to me that not even the writers listened to what she was saying when she said that the rich people live up in the hills. I originally wrote this as I was writing my review, but then I realized, oh no, this was very intentional. I wrote that it's basically pretty ridiculous that the Black Aja doesn't know what the collar looks like, and they look at the statue of the shackled man of Tanchico, and they're like, we need to find a collar like this. And then I'm like, that's not what the collar looks like. And I was annoyed by that detail until I realized that was literally a plot point. The reason that Leandrin couldn't find the collar is because it didn't look like the picture, because Nynaeve knew that the Adom collar was just like a little collar that turned into the sort of breastplate. And anyway, I thought that was like a continuity error, or like kind of dumb that they're looking for a collar that doesn't look anything like it, but it turned out that was a plot point. And then the last thing I wrote in my bad section, Lanfear and Rand talking about her true motivations. I liked that scene a lot. The thing I wish they had changed, this is just one of those, I wish they'd done this differently, is I wish that Rand had called her Muirin instead of Lanfear at that moment. Just a little glimpse of maybe Lews Therin affecting him. I have one thing under ugly, and that is killing Swan. I understand why they did it. They set it up. I actually really thought the story between Swan and Moiraine was very beautiful, and it makes sense that they did it. But I'm still not happy because I wish that they stuck with the books, and Swan is not killed in that way in the books at all, and has a very important storyline moving on. And that's obviously not going to happen now. So the question then becomes, who will take Swan's place in the story? And I won't talk more about that now because of spoilers, but I'm thinking maybe Moiraine, maybe Lyanna. There's a lot of possibilities. Okay, I'm going to add in a new section for this review called On the Fence. Okay, these on the fence things are just things that I'm still not sure how I feel about it as a book reader. So let me just go through the list and I'll talk about it. If you break your dark oaths, your soul will die with you, never to be reborn. That's what Lan said to Melindra as she essentially broke her dark oaths. She disobeyed Lanfear. She didn't kill him as she was supposed to, and it led to her soul literally like leaving her body. And again, I liked how that looked, but what? Like, that is not in the books at all. As a matter of fact, one of the very confusing things about the books is stuff related to balefire, which I'll talk more about in my breakdown video. But a lot of people thought that balefire meant you are completely removed from the pattern for good and you can never be reborn. And that's just not the case. Even balefire cannot permanently remove anyone from the pattern. That's a very important thing. No one can be permanently removed from the pattern. But my point is, this is definitely something they've added to raise the stakes for the show, and I'm on the fence about it. I like the idea because of raising the stakes. I think it's an interesting concept. Moghedien sort of hinted at this in episode 1 of this season with Jaichim, but I'm also kind of like, okay, is this real? Like, do these people actually not get to be reborn, or is this kind of a red herring and they're just thinking that's the case? Does also raise the stakes for people like Lanfear who want out of their dark oaths. It'll be really interesting to see where they go with this in the show, but as I say, I'm still on the fence about it. Another thing I'm on the fence about is the way that they handled Samael's storyline and Moghedien just killing him. Here's what I wrote. Moghedien killing Samael. It was properly set up and foreshadowed, and I thought the way she did it was super cool and gross in a good way, but I'm just not sure I like the Samael plot in general. Sure, we can't give all of the Forsaken the same treatment as Lanfear or Moghedien, but I would have liked a bit more from Samael. Now, I guess there's a small possibility that he can still come back from this, that he's immortal and he can heal, but I got the impression that he's dead. And I kind of hope he can't come back because that was disgusting. But anyway, I'm on the fence about that. And then another minor nitpick about the show that I'm still on the fence about is all the setup between Lanfear and Moiraine. I'll just read what I said. All of the setup between Moiraine and Lanfear and thinking Moiraine would die and then not doing it. I'll be honest, it felt to me a bit like the coward's way out. Like they planned to kill her and maybe Lanfear as well, and then chickened out because the show knows how much of a pull Moiraine and Lanfear are for the audience. I'm on the fence about this because I don't want either of them to die, but I also do want to see things happen the way they did in the books. That's actually why I think there's still hope for the end of the Fires of Heaven to happen in the show, which excites me for next season. I'm glad that Moiraine's still around. I think Rosamund Pike is so important to the show. Lanfear is such a likable and interesting character. At the same time, it felt a little bit like the coward's way out. Unraveling the Pattern viewers can get 10% off of all Wheel of Time merch from newcreationsbyjen.com using the discount code Unraveling10. This is a website from my friend Rob and his wife, and Rob's currently between jobs right now and could really use the help. And so they're offering this special offer for Unraveling the Pattern viewers where you can get 10% off all kinds of awesome Wheel of Time merch. They do awesome t-shirts, dice, flasks, stickers, bookmarks, all kinds of really cool stuff. I'd highly recommend checking them out. And every cent goes to them. I'm not taking a cent of this. This isn't like a YouTube sponsor. I just want to make people aware of this awesome offer. Even these cool maps that I have behind me come from newcreationsbyjen.com, designed by Rob Christensen, my good friend. So check that out. Use the discount code Unraveling10 on checkout, and let's get back to the video. The whole Eilfin plotline was really cool to me. I'm still a little confused who were the Aelfin, who were the Eelfin. Now you have to keep in mind on the screeners that I was given, the early access episodes, there were no subtitles. So sometimes I wasn't totally sure when someone was saying something. For example, in my last review, I said, I'm not sure if Padan Fain spoke in the Trolloc tongue or not, but it seemed like he did. And then, of course, the captions make it clear that that's what he was doing once the episode revealed. And this is also why my breakdown videos take me a while to make, because I can't actually start editing those breakdown videos until the moment that the episodes release. I can't do the editing from the screeners that I've been given because they're low quality. They have these watermarks all over them. So I try to write my scripts for those sooner, but I don't always get to editing until the day after the episode releases, and usually it takes me into the weekend and into the next week just because these videos take me a long time. So anyway, I appreciate your patience about that. But back to the great, what I was talking about is the Aelfin and the Eelfin. And the thing that's a little confusing is I wasn't sure if in the start, the opening sequence with Elida and Alviarin, if they were talking about the Aelfin or the Eelfin, the snakes or the foxes. My assumption is she said Aelfin. That's what it sounded like to me. So I'm sure by the time this review comes out, that'll be clear because the episode will have captions. I guess I'm just confused about who gives gifts. Is it the Aelfin and the Eelfin? Is it the snakes and the foxes? I'm just not totally sure. But anyway, I'll talk a lot more about the Aelfin and the Eelfin in my breakdown video. I'm really excited to break all that down for non-book readers, especially because I'm sure that sequence was extremely confusing. I mean, to be fair, it was mostly confusing for us as book readers too at the time. So this is what I wrote. I'll admit, as soon as I was given access to the full season, I skimmed through each episode just to see if we were going to get the snakes and the foxes. I know, it's terrible, but when they gave me access to all 8 episodes, I was like, I just have to know. I will appreciate this whole season better if I know the snakes and the foxes, or at least one of them is coming before the end of the season. And so, yes, I skimmed through. I'm not proud of it, but that's what I did. And I found this scene in the finale. I watched it and I was like, okay, I don't know how we got to this point, but I'll just have to trust it. So then I went back and watched the whole season. But boy, am I glad that they have the snakes and foxes as part of this story. It's such an integral and important part of Matt's storyline. And boy, was I excited when I didn't just see the foxhead medallion, but there's a very quick blink and you miss it moment where you do see his Ashandare spear. It's hanging up. That's what he's hanging from. It's like poked into the door frame and he's hanging from that. Interestingly, when it shows them in the Sea Folk ship at the very end of the episode, he wasn't holding the spear, which had me a little bit worried, but I'm pretty sure he has that somewhere, and hopefully that will be an important part of the story moving forward. Another thing that I just absolutely loved about this episode was the use of balefire and how they didn't explain it at all, but they showed the effect of balefire, and that looked so cool. When Elaine hit Jiane with the balefire, and then it showed this almost like spirit of her rewinding, and then showed the damage that she had done to the ceiling repairing. That was awesome to me. The look of the balefire, that's exactly how I imagine it, although maybe a bit brighter, but this almost like purple white bar of light, and the way that she had trouble controlling the ter'angreal, just like in the books, to me, that was all perfection. Another great moment, Nynaeve finally submitting fully to the One Power and breaking her block. What an epic scene. That was so beautiful. She went full Moses. I loved it. That was so good. Something I forgot to mention in the bad section, which again, I don't think this is necessarily bad, it's just we didn't get a Moghedien versus Nynaeve showdown in Tanchico like what happens in the book. So I'm actually looking forward to that happening in a future season. They're definitely setting that up, and I'm actually glad that it didn't happen yet in a sense, because I would love to see more buildup between those characters first. But overall, that was a little bit disappointing that we didn't get that. Nynaeve breaking her block much earlier than the books. Very happy about that. And honestly, when Nynaeve smiled at the end, because she was so like proud of herself and so happy to be over it, and just the look of sheer like delight on her face as she channeled, that really almost made me tear up. I really appreciated the emotion on Zoe Robin's face in that scene. That was excellently done. Moving on, Rand saw someone in the distance. I don't know if you noticed this. This was a very quick shot, but it almost looked like he was just seeing a mirage in the desert, but he saw someone. And I really liked that moment because we're getting little hints of Rand seeing things that may not be there. And that's really exciting to me. I don't want to spoil it much further than that, but I'm going to guess it was a certain somebody that we all know and love who's in his head, as well as we've heard whispers throughout the season. I really loved that Rand thanked Moraine for her involvement. It was a little bit weird. He's like, you manipulated me and everyone, and you knew that Lanfear was torturing Egwene, and you knew this and this. And Moraine's like, yeah, and I did it to separate you. And he was like, thank you. And that was a little weird, but I don't know, that scene between the two of them, as I already mentioned, I just love the dynamic between those two. And I thought that was actually beautifully handled. And the way, especially that Rosamund acted in that moment when he said thank you, where she started to kind of tear up, like, all of her efforts were worth it. That was a really beautiful moment. It also worried me when I first watched the episode that, okay, they're preparing for us to say goodbye to Moraine. She's going to die. Anyway, I had to add these to the great list because wow, Lanfear's outfit when she showed up with Robin and they saw Samael was dead. Man, that outfit was insane. And then also Savannah's outfit when they appeared at Al Kardal and saw her outfit. I was just like, man, Sharon Gillam deserves all the awards for her costumes. Just so, so good. The way that Ruark said, Rand, please, our people cannot face this truth. You will destroy them. And then Rand saying, this is what I was born to do. Chills. Like, yeah, you guys told me yourself when I arrived that that was my point, is I will destroy you. Well, that's what I'm here to do. That whole sequence when I first watched this episode was really scattered for me. And I was like, really, they're ending it on the rain? But I don't know. It just really worked for me on rewatch. And like I say, I watched it in much better quality with headphones on my second time. And on the first time when I watched it, it was just on my phone late at night. And boy, what a difference. Like that ending scene just really hit hard for me when Rand made it rain. And I thought the ending of the season was actually beautiful and perfect. And speaking of that, I noticed on my second watch something really cool, and I'll talk more about this in my breakdown, but what I'm calling it is the gathering storm. Rand gathered this storm as Moraine talked about the prophecies of the dragon and how the dragon is one with the land and the land is one with the dragon. And what I didn't notice on my first watch is that we see that storm gathering all across the world. We see it gathering over the White Cloaks as Fail, Bane, and Chiad look over them where Perrin is probably being held captive. We see the storm gathering over the White Tower as Elida enters her study. I guess it's her study now, not Swan's study, and takes over as Armelyn's seat. We see the storm gathering out in the ocean where the sea folk are with Mat, Min, Nynaeve, and Elaine. The gathering storm kept coming to my mind. And so anyway, I just loved all of that. So all of that in mind, I know this review is going long. Hopefully I can cut this down. I've been talking for a long time here. My camera even ran out of space. I had to stop. But all of that being said, one thing I wanted to do is just very quickly address some of the things that I said sort of vaguely in my full season spoiler-free review. So I'm going to just go down this list and talk about some of these things in greater detail. So here's what I wrote. General thoughts. The show is always better on rewatch for me, just like the books are better on reread. There were certain things after my first watch of the show that made me not love how the season ended, but after that initial shock that comes from things either not panning out how I hoped or being different from the books, I realized on rewatch that I loved how the season ended. And many of the things that I thought were unresolved actually were resolved, and I missed them on my first watch, as I've already talked about some of these. Things like setup for the next season, seeing Fail, Bane, and Chiad watching over the White Cloaks, or Moghedien hearing that noise. Which, by the way, what was that about? Moghedien hearing a noise. I think that Lanfear is going to travel to Moghedien to try to get healed. And I don't know how that's going to work out, but that's not in the book, so that's not a spoiler. That's just my wild theory. One of the things I mentioned in my spoiler-free review is that this season felt to me a little bit like Harry Potter Book 4 versus the movie. And I know that Harry Potter is kind of a cliche, dumb thing to talk about these days. There's a lot of controversy surrounding the author and everything. But the bottom line is I loved the fourth Harry Potter book, and the fourth Harry Potter movie was sort of a disappointment to me because I felt they spent too much time on side plots and teenage drama and not enough time on the things that made that book interesting to me, which was the Triwizard Tournament. And I just felt like it was really rushed. And I compared all of season 3 to that in my original review. And I still feel that way to a degree, but to a much less extent. As I pay attention to the details, as I rewatch, as I do these unraveled videos where I break down everything scene by scene, I realize that there's just so much depth to these episodes that I missed on first watch. And I recognize that a lot of people only watch these episodes once and then they forget it and their initial reactions are theirs. But by rewatching the show, just like rereading the books, I just get so much more out of it. And I realize the writers really are paying close attention to all these things. They're setting up breadcrumbs for the future, and I have a lot more trust in where they're going. Now, obviously, I hope they get a season 4 because it would be a shame if they don't. But I have to say, I'm really a lot happier with this season overall, even more happy than I was before. And I already thought it was the best season so far. But as a book reader, I'm way more happy after the second watch. Here's just a few other things I wrote in response to my spoiler-free review. I said I was surprised that they didn't cover more of the Shadow Rising. Originally, that's what I said. I was specifically talking about Nynaeve versus Moghedien, and I've already talked about that. I think they're setting that up to happen later. Perrin versus Lord Luke. There was actually an image that was released showing Lord Luke, or the actor who plays Lord Luke, with an arrow through his chest, as if it was some sort of important plot point. It was posted by Sharon Gillam, the costume designer, and I get the feeling they must have cut some things from this season. Maybe they didn't feel like it flowed well, or they had to cut things for time. I just hope that they're not getting rid of all that plot line and that they'll move it into the next season, because I think it's really important to Perrin's story. And we still need to learn a lot of things. Another thing I was disappointed about, which I wrote here, is Perrin and the Wolf Dream. What happened with that? obviously they can't do all of this in one season, and I'm sure they're going to spread it out, but I'm really interested to see if they're going to do more of that. I was just disappointed not to see it originally. As I've kind of had time to mull over this season and think about it, I still feel the Two Rivers plotline was the most rushed and kind of the least coherent and the most messy. But overall, I feel like I know where they're going, and there's still a lot that they can do from the Shadow Rising, which is what I was trying to say in my spoiler-free review. Another thing I wrote here is Matt and the Snakes and Foxes. That was another disappointment. When I originally released it, I was happy that we got the foxes. I wasn't happy that they skipped the snakes. But on rewatch, again, I feel like they're just setting this up. I actually think it's actually smarter to have Matt go to the foxes first and to be given these answers to some of his wishes, even though he doesn't really realize what's happening, and to have him want to have payback for that. I think that's actually better than going to the snakes first, having all these questions that he doesn't understand and wanting revenge just for getting weird answers. I think it's actually a smart choice to switch those two. And they have to do the snakes now, right? I mean, if they didn't, that would be crazy because they've definitely set it up for that purpose. And one more thing I said in my spoiler-free review, which I actually disagree with now after I've rewatched everything and really broken these episodes down, I said it felt to me like season 4 should pick up right where season 3 left off. And the reason I thought that is because I missed a bunch of the little bits at the end where as Moraine is quoting prophecy and we're seeing the storm gathering and we're seeing these different things, I missed the little details of like Fael, Bane, and Chiad looking down at Perrin and Matt and the group on the Sea Folk ship. I missed all that originally. And so I was thinking, well, we need to see Matt get the spear and try to go back through the doorframe to get answers, only to be able to not do it. And I was thinking, we need to pick right up where we left off with Rand in the desert with the rain and Mo Gideon. Nynaeve still needs to face Mo Gideon, right? And Tenchico, that's still going to happen, right? So there were a lot of things that I was like, they just left us on the edge of our seats about all this stuff. But then I realized no, they're probably going to skip forward in time, just like they have done with every season. They'll probably pick up with the group maybe at Tyr. That's my theory, is that season 4 will probably start right in Tyr, that they'll just skip right to that. The Aiel will already be there with Rand. I bet that opening episode will just be an intense, awesome Stone of Tyr scene where he'll take Kalendor. Maybe not. Maybe there'll be more setup for that, but I feel like they already set that up plenty. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. My point is, I don't actually think that season 4 should pick up right where season 3 left off. That was just me kind of misunderstanding what I had seen and misremembering some of the scenes that I missed. And I'm okay with that not happening anymore. All right, this video has been way too long already. Let's get into theories and speculation. As a reminder, this section is a little bit more spoilery. I'm going to talk about some things that happen in the books later. So if you don't want any more spoilers related to anything past the Shadow Rising, now's your time to like the video and take off. Thanks for watching. I will say, though, that I'm still not going to spoil anything too major. One minor theory. Rand definitely was seeing Lews Therin in the distance, right? I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more of Lews Therin in the next season. And then another theory that I'm really excited about, and by the way, I have a lot more theories. I'm sure I'll talk about these more in greater detail in the future, but this is my last theory for this video, and that is the Watcher of the Seals theory. My theory is that the seals on the Dark One's prison are actually in the 13th Depository. There is this interesting symbol on the wall in the background in the opening scene between Elaida and Alviarin. After Elaida comes out of the redstone doorframe, there's this symbol on the wall that has 7 points, and they all lead to something on the wall. And I think that might be where the seals to the Dark One's prison are. One of the things we've been wondering in the show is, where are the seals on the Dark One's prison? The Amarlin seat is called the Watcher of the Seals, but the Amarlin seem not to know anything about the seals that the Forsaken were trapped in. And we know that the seals that the Forsaken were trapped in the show have absolutely nothing to do with the books, because that isn't how it worked in the books. The Forsaken were essentially trapped alongside the Dark One, and they just kind of got released as the seals started to weaken. So I actually like that change in the show, that they have seals that are different for the Forsaken versus the Dark One. But where is the Dark One? How is the Dark One being imprisoned? And I think that it's literally right there in the tower. And that will also make the tower set and all of that a more central point of the story, which I think is a smart idea. The only thing that doesn't make this totally make sense to me is we know that the White Tower and Tar Valon weren't even built until after Lews Therin's death. So I don't know, maybe the seals or the seal that was used for the Dark One's prison was moved somehow to the White Tower, and that the White Tower was built up around it. Or maybe that symbol on the wall was just a cool symbol and I'm way overthinking this. But I do like the idea that we know that she is actually the Watcher of the Seals, and the seals are in the 13th Depository, and that's my theory. I've talked long enough. Let me just say this really quick, and then I'll get out of your hair. Thank you so much for supporting me this season. I love you all. Until next time, let the dragon ride again on the winds of Prime. Stop.